Precisely at the age of 37, I found myself in a space in life that a corner was turned and significant support in turning that corner was offered, that I was able to truly begin in earnest to live life to its fullest. It didn't start out as its fullest, it started out by emptying out all of that which had gone before it, so what there was left of the person I had then become, which was attached in lots of unhealthy ways to lots of relationships, to objects, substances, people, places, recollections, memories and experiences that had all been so neatly and carefully and categorically and cataclysmically introverted that it appeared in life as a hopelessness, the absence of hope, and a desire for hope, which is a very lonely place, and a place I would wish on anybody to want to desire hope. It's good to ultimately become hope-free, but to be in a place of feeling hopeless, to want to have hope, is, well, you can imagine, maybe you know yourself, how desperately painful that feels and sounds and is. But the purpose of articulating it here and now is what that enabled, what that was the seed of, out of the gift of that very desperation, out of that rock bottom for life, or out of the collapse of the programs for the first half of life. A wonderfully effective structure for life with a capital L began. I discovered what I wanted to do when I left school. The perception of myself, my place in the world, the experiences I'd been to and through, and that I still carried with me, and the thoughts and feelings and the unfinished business and the unresolved grief were all put out on the table to survey, and with wisdom teaching and love that was offered to me, in spite of myself and in spite of the difficulties and the problems that I had. It was the beginning of the embodiment of a larger picture than the attempts to perfect my own version of myself, or my own picture, or my own story, as I began to be born into a bigger way of living, a bigger mind to operate out of. And of course, it was difficult at first, it was vulnerable and it was painful, but only as painful as it was to begin to, and this is one of the fundamental parts of the growth process that I first went through, was to become emotionally articulate. It was the beginning of having feelings that I'd avoided all along prior to this. There would be the rising of an emotion like anger or fear, and fear obviously manifests as anger in the end anyway, if we don't know what to do with it. And a rejection and a combative tone towards the experience that I was having or that I was angry about. So when anger would rise, a lifetime of anger would rise. The anger at the loss of a parent 30 years before would rise. Some 30 years before would rise. So every emotion would come up at the same time. So there was a triggering of unfinished business and complex trauma, family trauma, generational trauma, and trauma of substance misuse and substance dependency, and the collapse of relationships, and the loss of things and people and loves along the way, and animals that I'd surrounded myself with for affection and esteem that they were very good at giving, excuse me, and remain, excuse me, very good at giving. So there was a coming out of that. The work that needed to be done was therapeutic, was emotive, was emotional, was spiritual, somewhat we might say, as I began to invest in meditation and mindfulness, as I began to write and journal and practice, as I began talking therapies, and all of those things, the safe space in which to articulate, the safe space in which to feel, the safe space in which to sit with, the safe space in which to make the same mistakes again, and to have an environment in which I could express how I felt about that and how could I do things differently. And some of this was peer-led, so people would be sharing their experiences of how they responded differently, or they would be identifying with me. Identification was initially at least a good place to start when I realised, when I was informed by other people, yeah, I've thought like that, I've felt like that, I've done that even. And to realise that the thoughts and the feelings that I carried with me and the experiences and the self-loathing and the desire to be loved weren't unique experiences. I've never experienced anything unique. If I've experienced a feeling and a thought and been through an experience, so has somebody else. And it's good to know that. It's good for you to know that you've never thought a unique thought. You've never felt a unique feeling. You've never had a unique experience. We might find it difficult to find identification with those things, but certainly at first identification with others that have been through similar things in therapeutic settings, to have that identification was paramount. So that the benefit of group work and group identification, or even one-to-one work and one-to-one identification, was wonderfully transformative, because I felt I wasn't alone, and I needn't be alone, or I didn't have to be alone. Even when I was alone, there were similarities that were sufficient enough to enable change, to enable the idea of change, to plant that seed of hope that was so necessary. So there was years of that, and there was years of returning to that. There's been years of therapy in the preceding years, and there's been years of happiness, and there's been the practice of going through the next pattern of difficulty or trauma or trouble or pain, and learning emotional articulacy out of that. All of the learning, it's been a bottom-up economy. It hasn't been the collection and accumulation of new information and new tools and resources that I could implement in my life so that I can respond better next time. It's been the difficulty and the trouble and the feelings and the mental tapes, the thought tapes, and the introversion of those feelings and thoughts, and the re-experiencing of items like self-loathing, resentment, fears, anxieties, whole seasons of unknown mysteries, months, years sometimes of trouble and strife and pain, in order to not do those things very well, to be able to come to terms with things and to not come to terms with things, and to wait and be patient and to develop resilience and to develop tenacity and congruence and trying again and getting up after falling over and not being able to get up, and having a hand held out to me to be able to get up and to try. And to not be able to try, and to fail, to try and to fail, and to come to dead ends, and to have relationships with people, with places, with situations and plans that don't come to fruition, to embody the necessary limits of life that life can bring to us, to be okay with difference, to be okay with other, to become curious about suffering, to be open-minded by the very closed-mindedness that brings up anxiety, to notice there is no fear, to notice that there are only, instead of fear, defences. What is it that I'm defending? What is the shame that's hiding underneath what is being defended? What if I'm not good enough? What if I have to try all over again? What if I do have to get up again? What happens now I've got up again? And coming to a place of, and this is perhaps the wisest thing of all, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know how this is going to work out. I can't control the situation. I can't do it. To fail, to succeed and realise success is overrated, to be uncomfortable, to sit with the absence of comfort, to bottom out again. I've known homelessness since that. I've known the collapse of relationships that really mattered. I've known unemployment. I've known the absence of finances for food. And I've known life on its own terms. and life spontaneously lived, and a presence to that, an excitement about whatever comes, and an excitement and a difficulty both invested in this next new experience. To not know, to once more be confronted with the very mystery of being a human being, and to not have it all figured out, and to live out of a bottom-up economy, to live life in reverse. Life in reverse.